Okay, good. I'm Charlie Conrad. I work for the Forest Service here. I want to give a presentation on land use changes that are right on the edge of the Forest Service boundary. And what I wanted to do is show these changes through aerial photos and give you an idea of more of a visual look at changes that occur and some of the implications that that has over time on the Forest Service management. The Forest Service was in around early 1900s. It was established from forest reserves. At that time, most of the people were in favor of forest reserves, and much of the land that was acquired or that was formed for the Forest Service was land that was very degraded. And along the Wasatch Front, one of the main things that the Forest Service, or one of the main missions of the Forest Service, was to take these lands and try to manage them so that they'd be in better condition. I wanted to show you at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon some aerial photos. We have a lot of aerial photos in our office, and they go back to about 1939. And so what I wanted to show you is that between 1939 and 1953, there's very little change. There's orchards. Can you see that? Okay, great. There's orchards down in these areas here. There's the road that comes up like this and then comes down like that. Okay, the canyon road comes up like, well, Canyon Road is this one right here, I think. This is in the bottom, comes up, and then it would go up the canyon this way. As you can see it, I don't even know if it was paved at that time. It may not have been paved in the 40s. And you can see at this time this was just prior to entering World War II. We had the military. I believe this is part of the military compound here. But between 1940 and 1953, that was removed. But it was this area was very rural. The Forest Service management was mainly wildfire control. Back in, I was reading at some of the old watershed surveys that they had. There was a lot of cheatgrass all the way in this area here, and most of the fires that occurred on the forest occurred because of fires that came off of more of the populated areas that were in the valley. It would hit these areas and it would run up on the forest. The other thing that we had is we were trying to, well, back in the 1930s, 1920s, we had a lot of debris flows that hit a lot of the communities down there. So all along the Wasatch Front, control of, or trying to revegetate the soils and making it so that it would reduce the debris flows was a big emphasis right along the front here. So between 1953 and 1963, the red line's the Forest Service boundary, and you can see some changes in here. I think that's the treatment plant that's at the bottom. It was sometime between those 10 years that was established. You still see orchards down here. A new road was put in right along the foothills, and there's a start of some homes coming in, but it's still rural. Forest Service issues that are right on the boundary of access, wildlife issues. Wildlife still used a lot of these areas down in here. Then between 1963, I was trying to find a 1970s aerial photo. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find a whole stack of them. But anyway, between 1963 and 1980, big changes happened. For one thing, the roads were paved. Well, actually, all these homes have roads that are paved in them. But, you know, this whole thing, the intersection has been, you know, anyway, you can see it. It's just such a big, big change in there. And there's there's still homes that are haven't been developed at this point. Then when you look at it here, between 1980 and 1992, really there's it's really the filling in of the empty spaces is really what's happening. And this right here is, you know, you've got a gravel pit that's over here, and then you can see it there. And then in the next one, this is in 2005. Yeah, this is still, I think this area up in here was still used as a shooting area. And then between this and 2016, this is still undeveloped, if you want to call it. When do you think this is going to fill in? As soon as the economy changes, probably? Yeah. Yeah, hopefully. But you can see the changes. This is right along the forest boundary, or right along here is where it's too steep to build, and so this is where we have a lot of problems with wildlife now in the people's backyards. I think some of the changes that we see down in here is we actually see a lot better soil conditions. We don't see as much sediment going down in here, but you see a whole lot more people. So here's little cottonwood up at Alta. When I go through these aerial photos, it just amazes me how this area has changed. And this is 1940. That's what, 60, 75 years ago. And it seems like, well, 75 years ago, that's a long time ago. 1940s was a long time ago. I don't know, it goes by really quick. It really does. I've been working in this for 40 years, and this is just, you know. Anyway, this is, right here is the Alta Lodge, if people are familiar with it. In 1940, you had George Watson was owned a lot, I guess about 1,600 acres or something like that. He made an agreement where they had a land transfer of that property that he had up there. There was hardly anybody up here. And he transferred the property to the Forest Service so that a ski area could be built. That's essentially it. But you can see here that these are the Alta Peruvian is right here. That's still a mining dump. I don't know if it's a mining dump. It's a waste rock pile. Let's put it that way. And this is where the rustler is. This is where this is pretty much where the parking lot is. That's it. And then this is undeveloped. This is the old town of Alta right here. And you can still see the streets in there. And this is a wetland area right there. And this is a wetland area here. The wetland area in 1963 is still there. And then the wetland area here, you can see that Albion ski lift was built by 1963. And so they had Albion ski lift. They cut through the wetland area so that you could ski from here over into to the base area right down here. So this is top of High Rustler. This is that the cat track that you ski down, and then these are the mining waste rock piles that are there, and there was an old mining building And then if you look at this one between 1963 and 1980, this is the lower parking lot. It took in, it covered the entire wetland there. And the thing is I don't say that it's good or bad. It's what happened. At that time, it was actually, you know, you think about after World War II or at later part of World War II, filling in of wetlands was something that was done for people's health because there was a lot of mosquitoes that bite you and then you get diseases, you know. So anyways, you can see that this area down here is where the parking lot is. The lodges were built up in Albion Basin. There, lifts have been built, and there were some run modifications coming down off of through this area. And I think that the angle, I don't know if the angle for Germania lift was installed at that time. I think it was after this. Actually, that was in the 1990s. So between 1980 and 1992, there were some modifications of, I think, near Corkscrew. They filled the ski area filled in some of that so that they could get people off the mountain. And then, but of course, this is a green color to it, but there's disturbances down here that have recovered a lot more than what it was up here. You can see. So I think that over the years, the soil and water conditions up in this area has improved a lot, especially since 1940. 1940, it was still slowly recovering, but the ski area has done a really good job of planting and trying to get the grasses and vegetation on the bare areas that's disturbed. And then between 2001 and 2016, the big difference is the number of homes up there. Let me see if I can go back one here. You can see right down here where Alta Peruvian is, that actually between 1980 and 1992, this is where a lot of development had occurred between Snowbird and Alta. And then, and this is where we are in 2016. The lower part of Wildcat had been modified again. This is, I think it was mid-2000s, where the ski area moved a lot of material from up in here down and placed it underneath the lower parking lot. So really what I see up here is that we had, in 1940, there was hardly any management at all up there. Forest Service management, we had some areas that were reserved when the Forest Service was established in the early 1900s, but it wasn't any of these areas where they established a ski area. And so the changes have been really tremendous up there. And then we're into the ski area management in a big way. Oops, let's see. Go forward. Okay, this is the different, these are views of Snowbird in 1940. This is the base area where the tram is now. But you can see that it was mostly a mining area. Hardly any other uses in that area. And then in 1963, it's essentially the same thing. Alta had been modified a little bit from that ski area. And then from 1963 to 1980, a tremendous change. In the later part of the 1960s, the ski area was built. When they built the ski area, they removed a lot of the vegetation for the ski runs that are up there. The whole area, I think it's the Big Emma, that lower part. Yeah, that was probably bulldozed, smoothed out, and it took some time to recover. And then from 1980 to 2001, here's the upper parking lot. I think it's the employees' parking lot here. I think that was paved. We see a lot more homes coming in between the two. And then down here, this is still a parking area that was, it was a gravel parking lot. There was a whole lot of sediment that would go into Little Cottonwood Creek there. And I think it was after a big storm that hit during the summer. I think it was around 2004 or so. Al Susi from the Forest Service talked to the mountain manager at Snowbird and said, we need to change this. And he went up to their supervisors and that, and they went in there and they paved that whole section down there. Made a tremendous change to the amount of sediment that went into Little Cottonwood Canyon. I think it was. I think from the very get-go it was, yeah. And then between 2001 and 2016, I think the main things that have happened was that, at least as far as soil and water, is that this was paved down here. I think everything else has been pretty much established. So within that time, there's a lot of recovery of the vegetation in here. And then we got this thing right here, which is the snowboarding tube, that thing. So the big changes in this is the changes in the types. We had actually, Alta was a premier ski area really from the start, but it took a lot of time to really develop it into a big ski area, and then Snowbird followed, and a lot of Salt Lake Ranger District's time is involved in managing what the ski areas would like to do up here. So let's look at another area. This is an area north of Richmond, Utah. If you're familiar with where Richmond is, it's about 4.5 miles from the Idaho border. That is up in Cache Valley. This right here is Highway 89. And what I wanted to show on this is the changes in development along the Forest Service boundary, which is right here. So right here, if you look at it, this is all like foothills. To the west of this would be all kind of rolling foothills. So this is all private land, private or state land or non-forest lands. And then from 1976 to 1992, I think there were 36 residences in that area up there. And then it jumped to about 118. About 118 between those years. And I think this is really the big years that development north of Richmond occurred. And then, then there were another, I think probably about 40 or so residences in there in 2003. And then in 2013, there was another 36 or something like 30 to 40 residences. And what we have down, a lot of those are some tract homes here, and just filling up some of the spaces between some of the roads up there. What I wanted to show with this is that in 1940 in Salt Lake, that's what this was like in 1976. And now 1976 to really 1992 is the year that are really, or the years that are really built out. And that's only, what, 25 years, 30 years or so. And I think what we're going to see is this continuing. Cache Valley is a big, it's an area which is really developing quickly. And I think what we're going to see, I guess what I was thinking is, especially for a lot of the younger people that are going into the land management type of profession, this is our opportunity right now. Opportunity to try to manage the use or access to the forest, and at this time where you can maybe put in trails, put in places where maybe mass transit, things that we have problems in Salt Lake right now. We would love to be able to have mass transit going up into the canyons. We just can't find the space in the valley now to be able to accommodate all the people's cars or parking, you know. We're having a hard time with it. But I think that this is the time in which we need to be looking at that, and it's not on the forest. It's really off the forest that we need to see, hopefully, a good plan to be able to make the transition to the next phase in about 40 years. And so the last slide is just a kind of a big list of things that have changed. I think one of the big changes in Forest Service management is firefighting and the costs of it. It's just tremendous now because the Forest Service pays for almost all of the wildland forest fire fighting. And now instead of being able to get up there and control along the forest boundary forest fires, we're spending millions and millions of dollars in aircraft that is putting it out now or controlling it. So, but anyway, that's just an example. But there's a lot of changes because of the lands along the forest boundaries are getting developed. And that's about it. Sure.
Now take a minute or two for questions, if anybody has any.
And now you point out that there's a lot of debris flows after wildfires. So are these landslides likely to increase because there's more development and more wildfires now?
I think that we've always had debris flows that came off the forest. In the early 1900s, well, in the late 1800s, all the way through, probably through the 1950s, we saw a lot of debris flows because of how much use of livestock grazing and had occurred along the Wasatch Front. But I think what we're seeing now is that because of development right at the forest boundary, that the values off forest are so high that we almost have to, well, we have to put fires out as soon as we can, but the damage that even a small debris flow can do, it gets really, really pricey really quickly. I think that's the difference now. About even small debris flows that were never ever considered as impacting in the past, impact us now. We have small fires. We had a fire that was outside of, or near Shepherd Canyon in Davis County. And this was, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I think it was. It was only 40 acres. We assessed that fire as a moderate burn. It looked really good. We had a rainstorm come down, and it filled up the basements of 2 homes and then spread all this material over in the people's backyards. And so I think that's the thing, that and it's really costly to clean those up. Any other?
Next question. More?
The Forest Service is responsible for impacts that occur on Forest Service land. The NRCS has a program, the Emergency Watershed Program, which will provide funding, usually matching funding, which will help communities to get help with if there's a flood that occurs. The Forest Service, the current policy now is that the Forest Service will assess what will happen on Forest Service lands, and then anything that happens off of Forest Service lands, the NRCS will take those out. Natural Resource Conservation Service. It's all a matter of funding. We're both under the same department.
All right, I think we have time for one more quick question.
Yeah, that's a good question. The question is, if the Forest Service firefighting funding goes through a different channel or something like that, or has a special allocation. Right now, forest firefighting goes to the funding pot for in the whole Forest Service. There's a push to try to have a separate funding mechanism for it. I think what happens is that there won't be any more new money. There will be a certain amount of money that will go to to firefighting, and about half of the Forest Service budget is in firefighting now. And so what will happen is it'll be divided. The funding that goes to for fighting forest fires will have their own money. What they won't be able to do if they do that is to take regular appropriations from the non-forest fire fighting appropriations, and that may be a good thing. I haven't seen any new funding from the Forest Service on any changes in that kind of appropriation.
All right, thanks, Charlie.
Okay, thanks.